And the U.S. and India have established a roadmap for defense industry cooperation for the next few years. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin made the announcement after meeting with his Indian counterpart Rajnath Singh. Washington is working to deepen ties with India and sees stronger military and technology ties with the world's largest democracy as a key counterweight to China's dominance in the region. The roadmap is considered significant as Washington maintains strict controls over what domestic military technology can be shared or sold to other countries.
U.S India partnership is a cornerstone of a free and open Indo-Pacific. And our deepening bonds show how technological innovation and growing military cooperation between two great powers can be a force for global good. And so on this visit, I'm pleased that we have taken new steps to strengthen our defense partnership. We established an ambitious new roadmap for defense industrial cooperation. We face a rapidly changing world. We see bullying and coercion from the People's Republic of China, Russian aggression against Ukraine that seeks to redraw borders by force and threatens national sovereignty, as well as transnational challenges such as terrorism and climate change. We discuss ways to increase information sharing, as well as new initiatives to improve maritime cooperation, including in the undersea domain. We also recently celebrated the launch of our first Defense Space and Artificial Intelligence Dialogue. And that will help us work more closely together in emerging domains. We are absolutely not trying to establish a NATO in the Indo-Pacific. We continue to work with like-minded countries to ensure that the region remains free and open so that commerce can prosper and ideas can continue to be exchanged. And so we will continue that work. And so certainly India and us share the same vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Well, for the latest, we can now speak with Arise U.S. correspondent Eric Ham, who joins us live from Washington. Eric, good to see you. Well, let's kick off with those F-16 jets being scrambled. This was no secret mission, is it? Because it sounds like something out of the blues.
Many of us in the area, we certainly heard it. And, given that we're in Washington, D.C., and of course, many of us are still, familiar with what took place on January 6th, there was growing concern that this might be something ominous. Of course, we learned that what it was the actual F-16 fighter jets actually getting clearance to actually go supersonic to try to intercept that plane that had entered unrestricted airspace. And of course, we see that the plane actually crashed and that there were no survivors, tragically, as a result of that crash.
Well, anyway, we'll come back as events unfold. We'll come back to you. But again, turning to the incident in the Taiwan Strait, this is the latest in a series of close encounters between the People's Liberation Army and the U.S. military. Last week, a Chinese fighter jet buzzed a U.S. military plane. What would the resolution look like, Eric?
Well, what we're seeing here is we know that tensions have been growing between the United States and China. In fact, just recently, we know that the military counterpart to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin refused to actually meet with the Pentagon chief. And so that gives you an indication of just how far tensions have ratcheted up between the two largest economic powers right now. In addition to that, we continue to see and hear from the United States that China is continuing to become increasingly aggressive in the South China Seas. And of course, this is just a latest example of that. Now, in the United States, what we are seeing is, even though there has been growing polarization in the United States, particularly in Washington, one area where we do know that there is ample support in terms of working together and bipartisanship is on the issue of China. In fact, we now see that with the Republican presidential field coming together, many of those candidates are lashing out at China, and China has become the number one boogeyman in the United States. And we're seeing that now the tension is palpable. Now, with that, we know that the Biden administration continues to try to tamp down those tensions, trying to maintain and keep the lines of communication open, particularly at the highest levels. Of course, what took place with the rebuffing of the U.S. Pentagon chief, that could actually change the trajectory of those ongoing and continuing conversations between the two nations. But right now, what we're seeing is it appears as though that the tensions are at an all-time high.
Again, the U.S. military has actually called that unsafe Chinese maneuver, but the Chinese defense minister is saying that such patrols are a provocation to China.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, we have seen not only these are just a few of the incidents, but as we continue to see, and actually I talked to some of my sources inside the White House who have continued to steadfastly maintain that they want no quarrel, no confrontation with China, and that they are not seeking to engage militarily with China. However, while we hear that from the administration on the opposite end of Pennsylvania Avenue, we see that the rhetoric is very, very different, particularly from both Republicans and Democrats who see China more as an enemy and not as a competitor, which is how the Biden White House actually frames China more as a competitor. That is very different from what we see on Capitol Hill. Of course, it is the Biden administration that will set the tone and the engagement with China. And in addition to that, what we are seeing from many of the Republican presidential candidates is they see China particularly as an enemy. So we're going to continue to see that level of aggression from the United States, particularly from potential policymakers, about where this all is heading.
Take this before I let you go, Erica. We're seeing increasingly stronger ties between the U.S. and India. So can you unpack what's happening here?
Yeah, we have seen the United States particularly try to court India as it was seeking its allies and alliances with nations to thwart a Russian aggression in Ukraine. But in addition to that, the United States and India is seen as, one of the largest democracies in the world. And so we know that President Biden has certainly made entrees to President Modi. In addition to that, the United States sees India as a key and strategic alliance in the region. And of course, we know that the United States also is attempting to try to use India as a bulwark, specifically against its growing tensions and hardships with China as well.
Eric Ham, thank you for your time as always.